What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, we got to talk about the big rumor of last night that's really stretched into today. Sony looking to buy Katakawa, and I hope that's how you say it. I tried to look up the pronunciation, so I think that's right. And now, there's a couple ways of looking at this. Obviously, the way that, if you've seen it from IGN or you've seen it from, like, the usual suspects on Twitter, right? A lot of this has come from the PlayStation angle, right? So, Sony buying it, but the PlayStation angle, FromSoft is obviously a really big one. So, I think they own about 70% of the stake in FromSoft, and then Sony owns 2, so they'd have 72. They'd have the majority, and I guess wouldn't be like flat out owners of it, but would be majority owners of FromSoft. So you'd have that, but also a smaller one, but not one to kind of brush off, is Spike Chunsoft. That's another one that and I didn't even know that, but they own them. Obviously, makers of Danganronpa back in the day. They're behind Dragon Ball Sparking Zero that they just did, right? So they're not to be discounted, right? You can't just throw them aside. And there's a couple other, I think there's like 5 or 6 game developer studios and all, but obviously, FromSoft is the biggest one. Let's not, we're not going to dance around that. But, there's the other angle that, from like the analysts out there, when you talk about the Bloombergs of the world and people that are doing the analysis on it, a lot of this stems from like the manga and the anime and the entertainment. Well, entertainment, I guess, would include games, right? But really, it's about that other stuff that might actually be the reason why Sony is doing this in the first place, right? And that is probably the part. I mean, like, it's probably scaring people no matter what, but I would say that part, because, they already own Crunchyroll, they already own Funimation. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I am super deep in anime. I like a couple here and there, but I don't know the ins and outs of the streaming stuff. I have seen, as time has gone on, more people complain, that Sony really is starting to get a monopoly on all this stuff, and it's not for the best. That's simply what I have seen. That could be narratives. I'm not saying it's true or fake. It's just what I've seen. But for them to take over this company would really be that stranglehold on that entire industry of anime, all that jazz. So that would, when we talk about Microsoft, with like the Activision Blizzards and Bethesdas of the world, PlayStation might actually be doing that, just kind of in a different department, right? So, hey, if you let it happen with one, I guess you have to let it happen with the other. And to be honest with you, that's kind of where I stand. I mean, I guess that goes more into the FromSoft stuff, right? So it's like, that would be gigantic. There's no other way of saying it. You look at their success, and I did see like tweets of, if you look at it, their ownership of franchises is actually pretty scattered, right? Like Bandai owns Dark Souls, I believe, right? And then PlayStation owns Demon Souls and Bloodborne. FromSoft does, I mean, like, they own, I would say, the majority of them, right? But 3 franchises, and, Dark Souls being really the one that started to really move them up in the world, right? That one's not even theirs. And then, Demon Souls kind of the originator, Bloodborne, one of their many hits, right? A lot of those aren't theirs. So it's just interesting how they've been scattered kind of for a while. But, with Elden Ring, like, I mean, this was the talk, right? Because PlayStation has been investing more and more into FromSoft, as time has gone on. And, I mean, it's not a stupid thing to do. Elden Ring sold unbelievably well. And you imagine, actually, Shadow of the Erdtree sold unbelievably well for a DLC. And then, the next game from them, you imagine, is going to be another smash hit. Armored Core did super well for being what it is, right? So, I mean, this is a company, just FromSoft, is a company that's incredibly, incredibly valuable. You know what I mean? And now, okay, the issue, or the worry that people would probably have, right? When you look at how they've handled things, Xbox has been more willing to put games on PlayStation. Now, not all of them. Like, we'll see, when you buy Activision Blizzard, like, which games actually do make the jump, which games just stay or now become Xbox exclusive. With PlayStation, it's probably more likely, although, I'll say this, I don't think it would be like insane, like 100% likely that, say, like the next FromSoft game would all of a sudden just be PlayStation exclusive. I would not discount it. I would not say like there's no chance in hell that would happen, but I do think, I mean, it's kind of the same thing that you think about with like a COD situation where, okay, if you take it off the rival console, yeah, it is the rival, but you make a lot of money through that, right? Now, like Elden Ring, you'd have to know, and I don't know, so I'm just saying like speculation, you'd have to know the split, right? So like Elden Ring sold, however, like 30 plus million, right? How many of those were on each? Now, you would, of course, need to do PlayStation and PC, but then, like, you look at Xbox and how much of a percent is that of the total, and then like, is it worth it? And I'm sure that Xbox has got, or Microsoft has got to be doing the same thing with their franchises like Doom and stuff, right? Like, why is Doom coming on PlayStation? Well, what's the split look like historically for PlayStation owners buying Doom titles compared to Xbox? They know that number, and I'm sure that influences it can't not influence, right? It has to influence their decision. So I get it. I definitely get it, okay? Because, and I guess I never even said kind of my whole stance on the entire thing. Going back to Xbox with even Bethesda, right? If we go back years ago, my stance has always been leaving companies alone, okay? Now, that's not always technically what's best for companies. Sometimes companies need saving, sadly, right? So they need to be bought up. But my general, like, moral, or, the thing that I live by, leave them alone. And I do that just like a day-to-day basis. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, except for these videos, of course. Now, in my opinion, there's like that fairness thing that happens. If Microsoft is allowed to get Bethesda and Activision Blizzard, I know people will say, like, well, PlayStation has Insomniac. That is not even remotely close to the world of spending that Microsoft did with any of their things, and also franchises and just actual like worker power, like how many workers they acquired. It's not even close. I understand people that say they took Spider-Man away and whatnot, but like Xbox has all, they've got like 90 franchises. PlayStation got one. That's exaggerating on really both of them. But my general point is, if you're going to allow it with one, you got to allow it with the other. So while I would prefer that Xbox left them alone, in the same way that I would prefer Sony leaves FromSoft alone, if they did it with one, I would say do it with the other. Now, again, it's a little bit more complicated because this focuses on like a media branch, right? It's not just you're not buying just FromSoft, right? You're buying, number one, like 5 different game companies, and number 2, you're actually kind of, monopolizing the anime and that kind of, you're actually doing that with that industry, right? So that is more severe, and that's something I'm just not into enough to like fully, like, for me, I don't really have an opinion on that because like it doesn't affect me, but it definitely does affect like millions upon millions. That's why it's actually so popular. That's why Sony wants it so bad, right? And that they've done a very good job of like getting them all. You could argue if they've done a good job like once they've acquired them, but they've really like marked their territory and said, okay, well, that's something that we need or we want. Like that's an industry that we think we can dominate, and they've done it. So I guess props to them for like knowing that. But again, like I don't know the ins and outs of it, so I don't really feel comfortable, going too far into it. But I get it. I mean, I guess that's kind of where I would leave this video off. Like, I understand the concern, and especially if it comes from that angle of, hey, well, now Crunchyroll, Funimation, like all that stuff. If it comes from that, I totally would understand that, just because I've seen enough of it that I feel like it might be a legitimate issue. But like the FromSoft thing, yeah, it would be big. Yeah, it's something I would prefer they leave them alone. But to me, I mean, like, if we're gonna do this, and I've said this before, right? Like, especially when Microsoft's buying, Activision Blizzard, eventually there's going to be none left. Eventually there's going to be like 6-7 publishers, and everybody else is going to be under those 6-7. It's just like which one you get, right? Roll the dice and see which one, it turns up. You might get a good one. You get, EA might buy you. Tencent might buy you. That one's spectacular. You might, who knows what you get, right? Like, you just kind of close your eyes and pick one. And I don't like that. I actually hate that. But that's where we're heading over the next like 5-10 years. So it's something that, we're going to be able to do these videos quite often, where it's like, leave them alone, but at the same time, I get it. And like, it's going to be that on repeat, right? Because eventually it's just going to be all of them. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.